Welcome back, everyone. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Canisius High School, back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular web series where we check in with our alums all over Buffalo and all over the United States and see what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware Avenue. I am joined today by a very special guest, a local guest, Mr. Herb Glose from the class of 1975. Mr. Glose is an attorney and partner at Barclay Damon here in Buffalo. Herb, welcome.
Thanks, Andy. Glad to be here.
And before we go backwards, Herb, and talk a little bit about how you found Canisius and stuff, tell us a little bit about your practice currently. What kind of law do you practice, and sort of what are your specializations?
Well, I kind of grew up, as I say, in the practice of law as a corporate lawyer, mergers and acquisitions, transactional law, financing businesses, buying and selling companies. And about 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to, interview to be counsel to what was going to be a newly formed not-for-profit in the healthcare space. And what they were looking for was counsel on not-for-profit corporations. And I had some experience in that field and with governance models. And I got the gig. And that led me to kind of split my practice to where I was doing half-time on the corporate side, the transactional stuff, but I really became interested in the health information side and the not-for-profit side, particularly in healthcare. So right now, I'm still split between those two practice areas, corporate and M&A work on the one side and healthcare on the other.
Wow. And so we'll have a chance to explore that a little bit further in a few minutes, but take us back in time now. Let's go back to 1971. You're an eighth grader. You're looking at high schools. How did you hear about Canisius High School, and sort of what was the reason for choosing the school?
So I was the youngest of four children by 9 years between myself and my sister, who was next in line. My parents were Depression era. They were born in the 19-teens and grew up in the Depression and didn't have much in the way of educational opportunity. My dad was eighth grade educated. My mother did finish high school for secretarial training, which was kind of what you did back then. So education was very important to them. Catholic education was especially important to them. They grew up and met at St. Anne's School in East Buffalo, which made, their Catholic upbringing made Catholic schools very important to them. And why Jesuit Catholic education was important, I think St. Anne's was actually a Jesuit parish, is a Jesuit parish in East Buffalo. But more importantly, my older brother went to Canisius High School, 13 years older than me, but went back in the 60s. He attended Canisius. And my great uncle, my grandfather was deceased, but his brother was a Jesuit, Father Joseph Glose, it was pronounced, the German pronunciation. And he was something to do in the New York province. I think he might have been the provincial at one point, but I only remember as a young boy, when Father Joe would come over, we always got the fancy glasses out or the fancy china. And it was usually around Thanksgiving time that we would see Father Joe would be in from New York City to visit the Western New York family. And I think he would have insisted on Canisius as the school of choice for high school. So I really didn't look anywhere else. And that's how I landed in the foyer in the fall of 1971.
And those Jesuit ties run deep in a lot of families. So not only from Jesuit schooling from you and your sibling, but you actually had somebody in the family who was a Jesuit.
Right. And someone I didn't know well, but I'm sure influenced the thinking that my parents had in, as I say, guiding me and really sacrificing, as I said, that, they were of limited education and limited means. So it was something for them to send me to Canisius, even though I think the tuition in my senior year was the first time it went over $1,000. It was in the hundreds of dollars, but there was still a sacrifice for them at the time for me to go there.
Sure. And during your time at Canisius, what were some of the like activities you were involved in, sports teams or clubs, and who were some of your influences on the faculty and staff?
Um, faculty and staff first. I mentioned to you, Father McShane, Mr. McShane back then was a scholastic and taught English with Mr. Sala. We called the course McSala because it was team taught by the two of them. But
Huh.
Mr. McShane, now Father McShane, became a great influence in my life, got me to like English, something I never thought I would. He was a great teacher in the classroom. He went on to teach at Lemoyne. We stayed in touch. When he was teaching at Lemoyne, he actually came back and performed the wedding ceremony for my wife and I at St. Benedict's here in Western New York. And then he continued to progress up the Jesuit ladder, but we stayed in touch over the years. He most recently retired as president of Fordham University after, I believe, a 20-plus year career there. And we had dinner last month, so we stay in touch. And he always has been a positive influence on my life. It amazes me how he is able to remember everything about myself, our wedding, our children, and recall all of that at dinners. He was somewhat disappointed that none of my children attended Fordham University, but that's another discussion for another day. The other teacher who was a great influence was Mr. Robert O'Connor. There were two O'Connors. One taught French, I believe. I didn't take French. Robert O'Connor taught geometry, and he really got me interested in math and was a great teacher for many, many years at the school, but a big influence on me. I had him, I believe, sophomore year, but that interest in math was really began at that time and continued to be something I pursued into college. As far as activities, I was active in sports. I played on the Acreons, which was the freshman team that played at halftime of the Canisius College basketball games at what was then Memorial Auditorium. You had to be under 5'5", and you had to only have limited talent because I wasn't good enough to make the freshman basketball team. But we played at halftime of the games at the auditorium, usually double headers, Canisius and Niagara. So it'd be at the odd for, 5 hours to play basketball against local elementary schools for maybe 5 minutes. But I can say that I played in front of over 15,000 people at one night. I remember what was called the Little Three doubleheader. They had 15,000 fans in the stands, and we played in front of them. Of course, most of them were out getting something to eat, drink, or use the restroom when I was playing. But I can at least say I played in front of that kind of crowd. I eventually, I played JV basketball and baseball, but my passion became football, and played on what was a team that didn't lose. And one of the other big influence I had was Mr. Werder was our football coach.
Sure.
And he went by the nickname Buzz, but he was a great influence to me. And I was lucky enough to be captain of the football team senior year, and worked closely with him and was able to kind of have a front row seat for what a quality person and quality coach he was. And I also got involved in student government and ran for student government and got elected to the president of the student council my senior year. So it was a busy senior year. I was very lucky in terms of the opportunities I had in those extracurriculars and the guidance I had. So a lot of good stuff came out of
A lot of great stuff. Yeah. And so you attend Canisius from 71 to 75, you graduate. Give us a brief history of sort of your professional career, where you went to college, how you fell into law, and sort of bring us up to date with where you are currently.
So I went to the University of Rochester initially thinking I was going to play football and perhaps be drafted into the NFL. I quickly realized that I had reached the apex of my football career at Canisius High School. I was third string at the University of Rochester. I wasn't going anywhere. And I flunked my first quiz. And I quit football because I was panicked, and I thought I would have that opportunity there. And when football wasn't going to pan out, and I realized that, I ended up transferring, and I went to the University of Notre Dame. And there, I wasn't going to play football. I wasn't even going to play intramural football because it was full equipment, everyday practices, and that was intramural. So I ended up pursuing rugby as an extracurricular, a little less demanding on time. But I also was going to be a math major. Let's go back to Mr. O'Connor, and that got a little challenging for me again. So I decided that I had an interest in law, and in order to go to law school, I just had to have a broad-based education. And so I ended up being an American Studies major. And the message was, if you want to go to law school, have a broad base in your education and do well. And I was, again, lucky enough to have that flexibility and realize that I had made some missteps along the way and needed to kind of course correct to get into law school. After law school, I went to law school in Buffalo. My parents were getting older. I wanted to be back home. I went to law school here and got a job with a local firm right out of law school. The managing partner was a Canisius High grad. I don't underestimate that. You could look up all that information back then in books. You had to look it up in physical books. Martindale Hubbell was this, and you could see where people went to college and where, even in some cases, where they went to high school. And so I really didn't have contacts in the law through family, but I was able to look up, and if I picked the person from Canisius and said, "Hey, I'm a law student, any chance I could get an interview?" I always got an interview. Wow. And in some cases, I even got lunch out of it. And in one case, I got a job out of it. And from there, I've always been in private practice. As I mentioned, I started in corporate law and transactional law, and evolved over time into healthcare. And now that is where my passion lies, and I think my future lies as I am kind of winding down my legal career, is focusing on the healthcare side of the practice. And to me, it's challenging, it's interesting, it's not cookie cutter, and there's plenty of opportunity for improvement in healthcare delivery.
That's great. And so as you look back on your career at Canisius and you look at your sort of back on your professional career, what were some of the things maybe you took from Canisius, life lessons or influences, or some of the things you took away from your time at Canisius that you found that you put into place in your professional life?
Well, there's always the, I don't want to say the standard answer, but the think critically. And that was something that I took with me. What I also learned was time management. I mentioned some extracurriculars, and if you don't have time management, by the time I left Canisius High School, I knew that studies came first and extracurricular. If you were going to do all this,
sure,
you had to learn how to manage your schedule, and I don't think that can be underestimated as something that I learned. And I also gained self-confidence. I went there. I mentioned the first day in the foyer, I was intimidated. I was, small grammar school where I was maybe big fish in a small pond. I don't even know. But when I got to the foyer and looked around, and it was scary. And by the time I left the high school, as I mentioned, I was given some positions of leadership, and that builds confidence. As I came forward with that, I had to learn the lesson of being able to sometimes admit I made wrong decisions.
Right.
I went off to a school, and that ability to, the acronym I use is HOW, HOW, be honest with yourself, be open to suggestions, and be willing to try new things is one of the things that even some of the mentors that I mentioned in my post-high school career, I was able to reach back on learn from in that regard.
That's great. And so if you could offer a couple pieces of advice, if you think about our alums today, think about kids that are about to enter into the wider world out of college. What are some things that you've learned in your career and your life that you think young people today would like to know?
I guess to be, have the right amount of self-confidence that you take with you coming out with a Canisius education, but at the same time, be open to the honesty, openness, and willingness. I think I learned from Father Naumann the to thine own self be true.
Sure.
Hamlet, I believe. Don't don't correct me if I'm wrong.
Put
But
yourself on a limb there.
that concept of being honest, starting with being honest with myself, was something that I had to learn, because I came out with a bowl full of confidence and made some decisions that were not wrong or bad, but there, as I said, there needed to be some course correction, and you need to be open then to listen to others. And early on, I kind of always knew better. And, unsolicited advice was always taken by me as criticism, and I didn't like it. And so to kind of get a different view of advice isn't always criticism, but to be open to suggestions from others, and willing to say, you might be right, or maybe I was wrong, or I made a bad decision, that isn't something that came easily to me, but over time, it's something I've learned to appreciate. And I think if I had to give advice, it would be to be open to those things, to be willing to listen to advice, and be willing to say, I don't know, you might be right, or maybe even I was wrong, or I'm sorry.
Well,
I have a choice. I think I went through all of those.
And that, what you're describing is what in Ignatian sort of terms is called being open to growth. And it's something that, one of there are 5 grad traits here at Canisius High School that we hope every student, when they graduate, has these 5 traits, one of which is being open to growth. And I think, you just described it to a T. Whether you're open to growth when you start, or whether you're open to growth somewhere down the line, it's a continuum growth. And some people are that way when they come right out of high school, and some people, learn the hard way, for a better way of putting it. But it's vitally important. I have a son who's a freshman here now, and we talk all the time, like, about being open to growth, new experiences, new perspectives, different ideas about how the world works, and being around people that share these different perspectives, and sort of what that'll do for you when you go out into the wider world. So I think it's a very, very good piece of advice, and very Ignatian, Herb, frankly. So I'm hoping all those kids that are watching this interview will learn from that. Tell me a little bit about the future. Like, what about, you've been practicing law now for, geez, how many years?
42.
42 years. Right? What about the future? What do you, when you look into the future? We've talked a lot about the past today, but let's look into the future a little bit. What are some things that you still want to accomplish? They don't have to be a professional; they can be personal. What are some things that you hope to do in the next few years?
Well, I've always tried to stay involved in volunteer initiatives. I've stayed pretty close to the high school. Both of my sons went there. I've had nephews who've gone there. And so I stayed in touch with the high school, and done a little bit of volunteering there. But looking at volunteer work as an opportunity for growth, rather than an obligation, that I think has been a gift that I've received from some of my mentors, to view those opportunities as opportunities, and not obligations. And I look forward to continuing some work I've done with local not-for-profits, and the person for others mantra of the Jesuits, I think, is something that I very much look forward to that. I find that very satisfying, those opportunities that come along. As I mentioned, both of my sons went to Canisius High School. I also have a daughter. She's getting married this spring, so we're looking very forward to that. I will keep working through that. She's
For sure.
obviously the rose between the two thorns, as I describe her and her brothers, but we're looking very forward to that. My oldest son lives down in the DC area, and he has two grandsons. My daughter also lives in the DC area. So our travel, we get a 2-for-1 when we go to the DC area, which is great. My other son lives in the Philadelphia area, and we regularly travel with them. And then my wife and I are doing more travel together, for ourselves. As I kind of wind down my career, as I said, I'm kind of focusing on the healthcare side of things, and we'll probably continue to do that for the next, I don't know, 1 to 3 years. But I'm blessed that I have choices in that regard, and my current firm, Barclay Damon, has allowed me to spend a lot of time on the not-for-profit healthcare initiatives, opportunities that I like. And so, and the other thing I got to do is get back in a little better shape. But that's
Join the club. We're all trying to.
that's
For everybody, right?
That's an annual New Year's resolution.
Well, Herb, thank you for spending some time with us today and taking us through your career and giving us some great advice and some things to think about. Alumni Weekend's coming up in June. I know you're a good friend of the school, and I hope to see you there in a few months. And please don't be a stranger, though, in the future.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate the opportunity, and I think you might see me in June at the golf outing or whatever. And I can't believe it, but next year is going to be the 50-year reunion for my class. It's
great.
Looking forward to that.
Look forward to having you on campus, Herb. Thanks for spending the time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye-bye.